well, historic news. Amazon in Staten Island voted to unionize. Congratulations. You know, this wouldn't be possible if you hadn't had the foundation set up to do this. Unions in this country at one point in time were a very strong institution. And then you got an individual that was also a movie star in the 1980s. I don't even want to mention the individual's name because, well, it's like a 4-letter word. But anyway, this individual became president in 1980. And as the 80s dragged on, unions started to decline in America. Your jobs went offshore, and your wages, well, they were drastically reduced. It was morning in America again. You remember the bullshit. That's when you had, well, the first opioid epidemic happened in America. You remember they were getting the drugs from Nicaragua. You know, and they were flying it back on the planes into certain communities. You don't remember? There was a whole article written in the San Jose Mercury News by a journalist who talked about that whole situation. You ought to go back and check it out. Unions have been decimated in this country for so long, due primarily to conservatism and crony capitalism. And I was overjoyed to see the vote. It was very close, 2,600 to 2,100, that the Amazon Union Warehouse chose to unionize. Now, you know in America, when victory is present, defeat is always lurking. So it was a joyous moment that, well, the adversary tried to rain on the parade. It couldn't be the story was that these people had at long last chosen to unionize. The first Amazon location to unionize in America. That should have been the end of the story. A very happy, successful story. But no. There was a journalist who asked the lead organizer, Christian Smalls, what he thought about AOC. And Christian, not being, well, adverse to the media and what they try to do, how they try to maneuver you, get a sound bite. So certain podcasters who will need things to, well, get views and clicks can share that and talk about it for the week. I don't blame Christian Smalls. This is a bigger issue than Christian Smalls. It really is. This is a larger American issue. Just like I said, the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap was a larger microcosm of America. This too is also a larger microcosm of America. The misogyny and racism towards women of color. It's so ingrained and embedded that even individuals of color do it to one another. It happens all the time. Christian Small doesn't even know that he's playing into this narrative, this very corrosive narrative of blaming primarily women of color for everything. Even when something is successful, who gets the blame? Women of color. That's the American way. Look, here's what happened. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had scheduled to be at the rally over the summer in 2021. Now you all remember how crazy shit was the previous summer. Go and look it up. Go and do some Google searches. See just how many murders there were over the span of the summer of 2021. It's gonna blow your mind. You look at how many shootings happened last summer in America. It was crazy. Off the charts crazy. And members of Congress since January 6th, the insurrection, the percentage of death threats everyone has got has gone parabolic. It's through the roof. Especially women of color. Oh, they get the most vitriol of the vitriol death threats. Believe you me, I know. I know how sick this nation truly is. Now, you have the whole entire conservative movement vilifying AOC. And you say, wait a minute, is this new? For women in America, no, it's not. Remember, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that there was a vast right-wing conspiracy targeting her. And that was true, simply because she was a woman. They haven't stopped. It's gotten far worse, far, far worse, far more insidious. I'm not a big defender of anybody, so I don't want this to come across like I'm defending someone's actions. I'm just laying out the facts as I see it. And the criticism of AOC not being present is flat dumb. And let me explain why. All across America, different companies are finally choosing to stand up, employees of these companies, for their rights as workers. It's long been time that the American citizen stands up and gets what's due to them. You want to run around talking about a runaway deficit, the conservatives do. But a lot of money that the government spends goes towards subsidizing large Fortune 500 companies. You know, like Walmart, the Walton family, who are worth quite a few decimal points behind the zero. And yet the federal government subsidizes health care for their entire workforce. I believe they have 250,000 employees. Walmart. Walmart is so profitable, they could afford to pay child care for every employee that has a child. They can afford to pay university to every employee who wants to go to university. And still be profitable, very profitable. So you ought to say, why is the federal government subsidizing Walmart's entire workforce through healthcare subsidies when Walmart can afford to pay healthcare to their employees? Simply based off of greed. And now finally the worker has realized that they're getting a rotten deal in the freest nation, supposedly, on the planet. And people are organizing for their right. Now, my question is simple. Is AOC supposed to go from business to business in support of every employee that's trying to unionize their workplace? Is that even feasible, a feasible task? Well, you say this was in New York. It was near her district. This is all true. But she outlined why that didn't happen. It wasn't like people didn't know. She mentioned it was logistics. It was death threats. It's a whole bunch of things. COVID notwithstanding. Nobody even mentioned coronavirus. A lot of people haven't done anything in person. Nor should they, based off of certain things that have been happening. I just found it the same old, you know. These criticisms, they continue to happen for women of color in this country. Continue. Non-stop. Never impeded. You know, we would still have the lunatic from Mar-a-Lago if it wasn't for black women and Latina women coming out in record numbers to vote against the lunatic from Mar-a-Lago. My question is simple. Why don't the people who are doing the most yapping, notwithstanding Chris Smalls, because he shouldn't have been asked the question to begin with. And the commentary that he answered with was sort of kind of leading. You ask him, what do you think about AOC? What do you think he's going to say? She wasn't present. He doesn't know her schedule. He doesn't know the death threats she receives. I can guarantee you, because I can speak for myself, we're on every Nazi watch list. On sight, they want me assassinated. The Sour Cream Brigade, you know, the white evangelical community. On sight, assassination. We know how sick this empire is. So, if somebody is getting their office place stormed, and thousands of individuals are looking for you, chanting your name, so they can execute you, do you really think after a traumatizing experience like that in January, that I feel comfortable going out in June of the same year? Even if I said I was going to do it, maybe I'm like, mental health is flaring up. I don't feel comfortable doing it. There were thousands of people that were looking to assassinate me on January 6th. One of them might show up if they know that I'm scheduled to be there. Did you hear what happened at Joint Air Force Base on Bloody Sunday? Just this past Bloody Sunday. There were two individuals that drove into the Air Force Base at the same time the Vice President's plane was landing. Your media is not going to tell you that it was an attempted assassination on the sitting Vice President of the United States. But we've gotten word that that's exactly what it was. You have to understand the level of savagery that goes on in this empire. You have no idea. You really don't. The average person does not know the games. No. I'm tired of the narrative that black and Latina and women of color have to save America, while everybody else can sit on their ass and do absolutely nothing. How come there was no asking of questions as to why any white male progressive wasn't in attendance? How come there was no asking of questions why there were no assembly members present? No, the question was targeted specifically for AOC because she's under attack by certain entities in this country who don't want to see a young, gifted, and talented Latina woman in power in the empire. It's just that simple. And certain progressives, I'm not going to name who did this, because I know. And I like this person too. But like I said, every midterm, certain individuals have a tendency in one political party to shoot themselves in the foot. Now social media has made it where for clicks and views and ratings, you present outlandish headlines. I get that. And it's well within people's right to critique. But I find it odd that the people always getting lambasted, always getting criticized, happen to be women of color. Was the governor of New York, who is a Democrat, was she in attendance? No. Politicians, as a rule of thumb, let me just say this, especially progressive politicians, a lot of times you don't want them there. Why? Because conservatives can easily demagogue it. Then they can say, oh, it's this leftist, socialist agenda. You know, like how Mike Gates was grilling the defense secretary today. Apparently, get this, there's socialists in the military. Who the fuck do they think is going to believe this bullshit? Their audience, the cult, the QAnon followers, they buy that shit. I just scoff at it. I'm like, really? Yeah, sure. Socialists in the military. Sure. I'm going to buy that. Sure. It's a joke. But a lot of politics is staged, it's choreographed. But when you're organizing, organizers are not staged and choreographed. Believe you me, I know. I was an organizer for a long time. I know how rough it is. How the tactics of corporate and police meet up to try to squash anything that you try to do to stand up for yourself or your community. It's brutal work. A lot of it goes unpaid, unacknowledged. The fact that AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, that they acknowledge, just simply acknowledge when workers are standing up for their rights. It's something brand new in politics, especially American politics. In England, the Labour Party does it all the time. But Democrats here, they have a hard time standing up for unions. It's not like they go out of their way to say, teachers, we love you. No, you got the political party, the conservatives, attacking and telling teachers what they can say in the classroom. And other Americans screaming and hollering at town hall meetings and board meetings about teachers teaching their children critical race theory and pornography, even though no parent has actually seen this bullshit in the public schools. You know, acknowledging something that's monumental is just as important as being present. I certainly can't be present for 99.9% of the things that transpire. It doesn't mean that I don't know about 100% of the things that transpire. Just because you're not physically there doesn't mean you're not there in spirit. Christian Smalls, if it had been me that the journalist had asked that question to, I would have put it back on the journalist. Why do women of color always have to bail out and save America? Can't they get a rest? Can't they get a break? You know, during the coronavirus, the pandemic that's still ongoing, essential workers were primarily women of color. Your maids, your nurses, your housekeepers, your fast food restaurant workers, your baristas. You don't see too many wealthy white men doing those jobs. I hardly see any. We can look at the statistics, because I know conservatives love talking about statistics. But who were the people who were essential in making sure that America kept running, even if it was running slowly? They were black and Latina women. Now, you assist your country during a pandemic, and Breonna Taylor happens in Louisville. You know Breonna Taylor, who got her apartment broken into, and LMPD murdered and assassinated her. And you want to blame AOC and women of color who saved America from Adolf Hitler round 2 if he got it re-elected in 2020. You want to blame that group for not being present one day, one time. This is hyper racist and misogyny and bullshit. And it's flat dumb. And it needs to stop. I don't care who does it. It needs to stop. It's beyond ridiculous and trifling. The same individuals who are yapping should get up and organize their communities. If they did 1/10 of the work that AOC does, this country would not have so many problems. Women of color always have bailed out this country. They're getting sick of bailing out America. America needs to bail out women of color. We went to Spelman and we talked about what needs to get done. And it's a fact that it needs to get done. I think we all need to remember this season that if you have absolutely nothing nice to say, try not saying anything at all. AOC is a comrade. I'm showing solidarity with a comrade who's shown solidarity with people. Before she was a congresswoman, she was front-facing the public, providing customer service in a skill that 99.99% of the individuals in Congress can't even measure on a scale. Can you imagine being a barista? People mock and laughing. But you don't mock and laugh when you go into Starbucks every day and your barista has your name on your cup and you get your Frappuccino or your mocha. You don't laugh. They're in the zone. They have to be nice and smile and courteous and speak pleasantly to you. When there's supply shortages and you're screaming at them, they have to remain well-mannered. Like it doesn't affect them. But I tell you, it gets to everyone. And then when you get to Congress, you have to deal with other colleagues of yours chasing you down the hallway, coming up to your congressional office door, telling you to come out. You have to be bothered with bullying and childlike behavior from grown women who are racist as fuck. And then you have to deal with, well, if I don't go to every meeting, if I miss one organizing session, I'm a sellout, I'm a fraud, I'm no good, I'm worthless. You see how the game is so rigged against women of color that you cannot win, no matter what you do. This is not new. America, you hated Martin Luther King Jr. You go and you look at his approval ratings when he died. Hardly no one liked Martin Luther King Jr. Nobody was quoting Martin Luther King Jr. when he was assassinated in America. But then all of a sudden he became loved as more people started to find out what he did for this country. John Lewis, when he was getting into good trouble, being beat on the head on Edmund Pettus Bridge, his approval rating was in the toilet in America. Nobody liked John Lewis. I know what this is. Nobody liked Barack Obama in 2010. The Republicans were telling you there was going to be death panels and that you wouldn't get to keep your doctor. You remember all that bullshit. The Affordable Care Act was not popular. I didn't like the Affordable Care Act because it didn't have a public option. I wanted Medicare for all. But there were a lot of Americans that were like, this is going to destroy America. Because senators like Marsha Blackburn were telling them that there's going to be death panels. You can't win for losing. Especially if you're a woman of color in America. It's so tragic and repulsive. And it's so sickening. Even if AOC didn't have any logistical issue, which she probably did, even if she didn't have any death threats, which we know she has an abundance of, if someone is tired and needs a break, missing one organizing session is not the end of the world as we know it. So please, to the individuals who often and always jump at a chance to criticize a woman of color, please do your due diligence. Look at all of the things that women of color have done for America and measure that up with your group if you don't identify as a woman of color, and see if it comes anywhere close. I guarantee you, it fucking doesn't.